They say your 30s are when you truly come into your own. I always imagined mine would be a grand unveiling, a celebration of everything I'd built. I just never imagined it would be the demolition of it all, starting with my own birthday cake. Our home, a meticulously restored brownstone in a quieter part of Chicago, was my pride. Every antique Eames chair, every carefully chosen Farrow and Ball paint swatch whispered of a life curated, a life of quiet success. Ethan, my husband of 5 years, was the charming architect of this public image, always ready with a supportive smile for my interior design business, always the perfect host. But behind the handcrafted oak doors, the silence had started to grow, to fester, especially in the rooms we'd earmarked for a nursery. For 2 years, trying had been our silent, third roommate. 2 years of ovulation kits, temperature charts, and hushed, hopeful conversations that slowly turned into strained whispers, then into nothing. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, or so I thought, would pat my hand and say, "It'll happen when it happens, Sarah love." But his eyes, they'd already left the room, moved on to the next project, the next distraction. I once found a brochure for a high-performance sports car tucked inside his fertility research folder, a tiny, absurd betrayal that pricked, sharper than any needle. My little sister Olivia, 2 years my junior, was a whirlwind of bright lipstick and fleeting ambitions. She'd always had a talent for capturing the spotlight, often by subtly nudging others into the shadows. Her visits were always a flurry of excitement and, I was beginning to realize, a strange, almost imperceptible inventory of my life, my home, my husband. There was a new glint in her eye lately, a possessiveness when she looked at Ethan that I'd dismissed as sisterly affection. How naive I had been. The preparations for my 30th birthday party were in full swing. An intimate dinner at the Crimson Room, our favorite upscale haunt downtown. Ethan was handling all the arrangements, a grand gesture he'd called it. "You just relax and get beautiful, darling," he'd said, kissing my forehead. But that morning, while looking for a misplaced earring in his gym bag, my fingers brushed against not one, but 2 new, expensive-looking silk ties, ones I hadn't bought, and definitely not his usual style. And then there was the scent clinging to his jacket when he came home late the night before. A perfume I knew wasn't mine, but achingly, disturbingly familiar. It was Olivia's signature Jasmine Noir. The pieces were there, scattered and confusing. But my mind, conditioned by years of trust, refused to assemble them into the monstrous picture they were forming. Not yet. The Crimson Room was living up to its name, bathed in a sultry, expensive glow. Soft jazz barely masked the frantic thumping of my own heart. Our reserved private alcove, intended for intimacy, felt more like an interrogation chamber than a celebratory space. The velvet ropes a flimsy barrier against the impending disaster I could feel brewing in my gut. Ethan was a little too attentive, almost obsessively so. His hand, a constant clammy pressure on the small of my back, adjusted my chair every time I shifted. His laughter, whenever my parents or our few close friends offered toasts, was a shade too loud, a bit too forced. He even refilled my water, glass 3 times in 10 minutes. A nervous energy crackling around him. He was performing, I realized with a sickening lurch, not for me, but for an unseen audience, or perhaps trying to convince himself. Then Olivia arrived, fashionably late, naturally, as if the world patiently awaited her presence. She swept in wearing a dress that was perhaps a size too small, a vibrant crimson that dared to compete with the restaurant's opulent decor, and heels that clicked with an almost aggressive confidence on the polished floor. It wasn't just an entrance. It was a calculated statement, a demand for attention. Her eyes, wide and unnervingly bright, performed a swift scan of the room, bypassing my parents, lingering on Ethan for a fraction of a second that stretched into an eternity for me, before finally settling on my face with an effusive, almost theatrical, "Happy birthday, big sis." The hug she gave me was tight, her cheek brushing mine with a coolness that belied her warm words. It felt strangely proprietary, as if staking a claim on something, or someone, in this room, not offering genuine comfort. The small talk that followed was a minefield, each sentence laden with unspoken anxieties. My mother, bless her determinedly, oblivious heart, prattled on about Olivia's latest, almost famous social media collaboration, a brand deal for some obscure wellness tea. My father, a man of few words but possessing an almost unnerving observational acuity, kept glancing, between Ethan and Olivia, then back to me, a subtle furrow etching deeper into his brow. I caught his gaze, a silent question passing between us, and a cold dread trickled down my spine, confirming my own unease. He, too, sensed the discordant, dangerous note vibrating in the air. Olivia, meanwhile, skillfully deflected any real questions about her own life, preferring to turn the conversation back to me, or, more pointedly, to Ethan. "You look a little stressed, Ethan," she'd said at one point, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Sarah not working you too hard, is she?" A comment so seemingly innocent, yet so clearly designed to needle, to imply. Ethan, usually so smooth and articulate, fumbled with his wine glass when Olivia later asked him a direct, overly familiar question about a confidential detail of his latest construction project, something I myself hadn't even been fully briefed on. His answer was vague, clipped, his eyes darting around. "He's just been so swamped, haven't you, darling?" Olivia cooed, her voice a silken purr as she reached across the table, her perfectly manicured fingers playfully, possessively tapping his hand. It was a gesture so casual in its execution, yet so breathtakingly intimate in its implication. It made the air crackle with unspoken tension. My own hand, resting on my lap beneath the heavy linen napkin, clenched into a fist so tight my nails bit into my palm. I remember needing to excuse myself for a moment, just to breathe. As I walked towards the powder room, out of the corner of my eye, I saw their heads lean in close together, a conspiratorial whisper passing between them before they quickly straightened, up, startled, as a waiter approached their side of the table. The gifts were presented. Thoughtful, expensive tokens from my parents and our close circle. A first edition of my favorite novel, A Spa Weekend. Ethan's was a delicate diamond necklace, a classic piece I'd idly admired in a shop window months ago. He fastened it around my neck, his fingers surprisingly cold, almost trembling against my skin. "To my incredible wife," he murmured. His lips brushing my ear, the scent of his familiar cologne suddenly mixed with a faint, almost imperceptible trace of jasmine. Olivia's jasmine. The words felt like ash in his mouth, rehearsed, hollow, like lines from a tired play he was desperate to see end. Olivia's gift was saved for last, presented with a flourish. A small, elegantly wrapped box. Inside, nestled on a bed of rich satin, was a single, antique silver baby rattle. The room plunged into an unnerving silence. Not a congratulatory silence, the kind that follows happy news, but a stunned, deeply uncomfortable one. My mother gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's frown deepened into a scowl. Ethan stared at the rattle as if it were a live grenade, his face paling. I just thought, you know. "For the future," Olivia trilled, her voice a high, brittle tinkling, shattering the quiet. She wasn't looking at me, not directly. Her gaze, full of a strange, triumphant little smile, was fixed on Ethan. "It's never too early to hope, right? Ethan? Or to plan?" The way she added that last word, the almost predatory glint in her eyes as she held his gaze, sent a true shockwave through me. And in that precise moment, watching his Adam's apple bob convulsively in his throat, his eyes darting towards me with a flicker of sheer panic before skittering away, the monstrous, sickeningly clear picture finally, irrevocably, clicked into place. This wasn't just a passive wish for my future. This was an active, deliberate declaration about hers. And his. The antique silver rattle lay on the pristine white tablecloth between us, a cold, metallic omen. The air in the Crimson Room's private alcove was thick enough to choke on, every breath labored. My father's stony silence was a judgment in itself. My mother's fluttering hands and darting, panicked glances between Olivia and Ethan painted a picture of social ruin. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the rattle, his knuckles white where he gripped his water glass, a muscle, twitching erratically in his jaw. Olivia, however, seemed to draw strength from the suffocating tension. She picked up the rattle, its tiny silver bells emitting a series of cheerful, wholly inappropriate chimes in the heavy silence. "Well," she began, her voice falsely bright, a brittle veneer over something hard and calculating. She glanced at Ethan, a quick, almost imperceptible nod passing between them, a signal I wouldn't have caught if my senses hadn't been screaming. At a fever pitch. "Since the, future seems to be on everyone's mind." She paused, letting the insinuation hang in the air, a poisonous perfume. "Ethan and I..." "Well, we have some news," she continued, finally turning her gaze to me, though it was less a look of confession and more one of defiant challenge. "We're pregnant." The two words dropped into the room like stones into a still pond, the ripples of shock instantaneous and brutal. My mother let out a small, strangled cry, immediately stifled. My father visibly recoiled as if struck. Our friends, faces frozen in disbelief, looked from Olivia to Ethan, then to me, searching for some explanation, any explanation, for this madness. Ethan finally looked up, his face a mask of tortured anguish that even in my dawning horror I recognized as patently false. "Sarah, darling, we never meant for you to find out like this," he stammered, reaching for my hand with a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like the touch of a viper. His eyes pleaded, not for forgiveness, but for my complicity in his charade. For me to play the understanding wife. It just happened. It was a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. A mistake, a 5-year marriage, years of shared dreams, now dismissed as a prelude to his mistake? A mistake? Olivia chimed in, her voice sharp, cutting through Ethan's pathetic mumbling. "Don't be so dramatic, Ethan. It's not a mistake when you love someone." Her eyes flickered towards me again, a glint of pure, unadulterated triumph in them. She was enjoying this, every second of my unraveling. This wasn't an accidental reveal. This was a meticulously planned execution. My throat closed. Words, 1,000 screaming accusations, died before they could form. I could feel the blood draining from my face, the room starting to tilt. This was it, the moment they expected me to shatter, to become a hysterical, weeping mess, confirming their narrative of me as the unstable, perhaps infertile wife he was justified in leaving. And a part of me, the part that still clung to the ghost of the man I thought I'd married, the sister I thought I'd loved, did shatter. The pain was a physical blow, stealing my breath, crushing my chest. I remember my hand flying to my mouth, a gasp escaping. Tears welled, blurring their triumphant faces into grotesque caricatures. How could you?" I finally whispered, the words barely audible, laced with a genuine, soul-deep agony they mistook for complete surrender. My shoulders slumped. I let a single tear trace a path down my cheek. I let them see the devastation. "Oh, Sarah," my mother, rushed to my side, not to comfort me, but to manage the scene. "Don't make things worse than they are. We'll figure this out as a family." Family? The word was a cruel joke. Ethan continued his performance of remorse, while Olivia watched me, her expression a carefully constructed mask of sympathy, but her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were assessing my every tremor, every tear. They were waiting for the full breakdown, the explosion that would validate their actions. And as I sat there, feigning a descent into a grief so profound I could barely function, a different, colder part of my mind was already working, already calculating. The image of that damning medical report, the one I'd found tucked away in Ethan's secure home office safe after a desperate late-night search fueled by months of gnawing suspicion, flashed behind my eyes. Azoospermia, the diagnosis, had read. 0. Absolutely, unequivocally 0. This baby, this celebrated mistake, could not possibly be his. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea the game I was about to start. The party ended not with a bang, but with the whimpering, undignified exit of my dignity. Or so they believed. The tears stopped that night. What replaced them was a clarity I hadn't felt in years, a chilling resolve that settled deep in my bones. My first phone call wasn't to my mother, who I knew would only offer platitudes and pressure me to forgive. It wasn't even to a lawyer, not yet. It was to Maya, my sharpest friend, the one who saw the world in black and white, no shades of gray, and right now I needed that stark clarity as I laid out the ugly, tangled mess of their betrayal. Piece by sordid piece, a new kind of fire ignited within me, burning away the shock and the pain. They thought they'd seen me broken. They had merely witnessed the shedding of a skin I know longer needed. The hunt for the real truth, the irrefutable proof that would not just expose them, but dismantle their entire deceitful world, was about to begin. And believe me, the secrets I was about to uncover, the meticulously laid traps I was preparing to spring, would make that birthday announcement look like a clumsy, amateurish prank. So, what do you think Sarah's first move should be to expose Ethan and Olivia's web of lies? Should she confront them directly again, or gather more ammunition in secret? Drop your theories and your best revenge ideas in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you're ready to see how Sarah turns the tables and starts serving some ice-cold justice, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and definitely ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single satisfying moment of part 2. The story is far from over. In fact, the real game has just begun.